Welcome everybody to our BNI Talks webinar. This week we've got James Muir. Some of you may know James. He's been around BNI for a couple of years now. You may have seen him on webinars with Jenny Butts and other people. And we are talking about the ABCs of selling today and lots of great information, tons of info. So be prepared for some really good stuff. Get ready to take some notes. And I'm going to turn it over to James and take it away, James.
All right. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It's great to be back, right? If you don't know me, my name is James Muir. I've done trainings for BNI for almost 2 years now, and I'm known for this book I wrote called The Perfect Close, which is very much in alignment with the BNI values, which is I think why it's our relationships worked out so well. But I will be presenting as a keynote at the national conference in Miami. So if you go to that, I can see in person. And I think I'm actually going to be doing a workshop too. So a very small concept that I'm going to cover today, I might be doing for about an hour or 90 minutes in Miami. So we just get our hands really dirty on that part of it. And I'm used when I'm working with BNI, I'm used to only having a few minutes to stuff in as much as I can. and so when I got a little bit more time here, I thought, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Okay. So if you've seen some of my other BNI training, you're going to see some new material here, right? And material that help you both in your role at BNI as well as your own personal business. So hang on, right? Because I'm going to deliver a lot of content here, right? And you'll be able to apply that to your own personal circumstance. And I promise it'll make a massive difference for you. The title of the session is The ABCs of Selling. Subtitle, The 4 Most Important Factors for Generating New Business. Okay. And there's a lot here. To be fair, we could do an entire session on every one of these principles, all 4 of these principles, right? And I'm happy to dig into that a little more in the Q&A at the end. So I'm going to kind of apologize for all the content that you're about to get, but kind of not, because I know what you guys are capable of. Okay. So I know you're going to find some value here. And when it comes to generate new business, these principles that I'm going to share with you right now are the highest leverage, meaning they're the most important. Okay. And they'll generate the most bang for your buck. That's what the data shows. Okay. So get your notebook out, buckle up. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to start by asking a question. What do you think is the top priority for businesses across all industries? When you survey it, type your answer in the chat. Let's just see what you guys think. Okay. What is the top priority for businesses across all industries? We got relationships, we got profit, we got sales, we got making money. Okay. We're seeing a lot around making money, making profit. Okay. And well, here's what I'm going to tell you. The answer is that according to IS, it's a marketing group. In 2022, 77% of all businesses, all sizes across all industries, okay, say that lead generation for the purpose of generating revenue, so I think you're all right there that I'm seeing in the chat, is their top priority, 77%. Okay. In a few cases where it's not their top priority, it's actually number 2. Okay. So do you tell me, does that ring true for you guys and your business? Right? Is generating new business a top priority for you? I think for most people that are participating with BNI, yeah, it is, right? That's why we're members of BNI. Okay. So, but here's the bad news. Guess what? Generating new business in general is getting harder. A recent HubSpot survey, they asked businesses and entrepreneurs all over the world, they said, what is more difficult to do now compared to 2 to 3 years ago? And here are the top responses in order of frequency. Getting a response from prospecting, connecting with them over the phone, engaging multiple decision makers, identifying and prospecting good leads, closing deals, connecting email, and on and on. Holy smokes! All but 4 of these on this list that are harder to do than 2 or 3 years ago. All but 4 are related to business development and generating new business. Okay, that's a shocking revelation, right? In what's getting harder. And what I want to share with you in this presentation is the 4 most important factors that I used personally when I first got into selling. You might not all know this. I'm an accidental salesperson. I did not go out and say, hey, I want to become a sales guy, right? So I fell into, I'm an ops person by nature, okay? But this allowed me to go from a pipeline of 0 to literally breaking every record in my company. Okay. And even better, I'm going to show you tools and techniques that I could have only dreamed of when I first started. Okay. So if you're up for something like that, type in the chat, let's go. Okay. And the question is, how do we do it? All right, thanks, Reem. So how do we do it? Well, there's 4 key areas that we want to focus on. And these are the areas we want to focus on before we start adding a ton of energy, right? So it's about working smart before we start working hard. Okay. And we want to do both, but we want to work smart. Okay. And I won't lie, that was a little tricky for me because I was a little slow at first. My antenna, because I came from the operations world, my antenna wasn't really picking up all the channels, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. So what's causing business development and generating new business to be harder than it was before? Okay. And I'm just going to cover this in a microcosm, but the top driver by far is sales and marketing message overload. Customers are literally drowning in sales and marketing noise. And what the latest data shows is that all of us are exposed to somewhere around 10,000 sales, marketing, and branding messages every day. 10,000. Okay. They come from every conceivable channel. And you don't get hit with 10,000 messages a day without building up some kind of a defense, right? And so there's barriers to every single channel that we might use to reach our customers. And they're using technology and all kinds of things to block that. Okay. So the second reason that generating new business is getting harder is the internet. And because of the internet, customers prefer to ignore our efforts, right? Our marketing and sales efforts, and just go to the internet first to get their answers about products and solutions. Right? That's the challenge right there. And then the third reason that I just want to briefly touch on is that attention spans for customers is diminishing. Okay, consumers actually are flipping their screens about 21 times an hour, according to a British study, and that correlates pretty closely to Microsoft's claim that the average person's attention span is now somewhere around 8 seconds. Right? Which is a little bit less than a goldfish is attention span. So what that means is when we finally do connect with someone, we have this really, really small window of time that we can use to get our message across. Okay. All right. So what's the answer to this? Well, you'll laugh at this, but when you survey businesses and you say, hey, here's all the challenges, what are you going to do? Would you like to know what they say? This will blow your mind. It cracks me up. They say that their number one strategy is they're just going to do more. They're going to ratchet up activity. Okay. More of everything, more advertising, more emailing, more social, more everything, right? And yet it's that very ratcheting up of activity that's driving the number one challenge in new business generation, right? Do you guys see the irony in that, right? Like the problem is too much messaging. So what are we going to do to solve the problem? I'm going to do even more messaging, right? And so to me, that's like a gambling addiction, right? We lose money on a bet. So what are we going to do to make it up? We're going to do another bet. Right. So, and as it turns out, it's actually even worse than this because there's actually a whole new set of challenges that we don't have time to go to in this meeting that's going to make that more strategy even less effective. Okay. So the good news is that despite both the seen and the unseen challenges here, the latest data actually shows that there's a really clear path to navigating both sets of those obstacles that brings the greatest success. And what most businesses are surprised to discover is they just haven't been focusing on the highest leverage points in their business development efforts. And they're even more surprised to discover that just by tweaking things, by making minor adjustments to their business development, that they can actually create massive improvements in effectiveness. Okay. And that's what we're going to cover in this. These minor adjustments fall into these 4 main areas: market, message, medium, and motivation. These 4 things. Okay. And that's what we're going to go through today. And by the way, none of these is new, right? But as it turns out, it's our approach and our execution in these 4 areas that's what the data shows makes the difference. Okay. And again, what that data shows is that minor tweaks to our approach in these 4 areas can create massive differences in results. Okay, so small changes make a big difference. And that brings us to our key point, our first key point, which is that small changes make a big difference. Okay, minor tweaks in approach and execution produce improvements of up to thousands of a percent. Okay, you guys ready to learn what those are? Okay, all right, here we go. The first of those is market. And when I say market, what I mean is targeting. Okay. And so we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to cover the basics here. But what is the single biggest thing you can do to improve sales? That one of my clients asked me that. They said, hey, James, what's the single biggest thing we can do to improve sales? And you would think, as a author of a best-selling book on closing, that my answer to that question would be closing. But guys, it isn't. Okay. What the data shows, right, is that the single most effective thing you can do is to only sell to ideal candidates. That's what the data shows. If you can just make sure that every conversation you're having is not with someone that can actually buy and wants to get what you're selling, that's the single most effective. And the reason for that is everything else is downstream from that, right? Everything else is like, it doesn't matter how great your messaging is, or your computer automation, or all of that stuff. If you're selling to the wrong person, all of that stuff just ends up falling on deaf ears. Okay, so no amount of brilliant messaging or automation or anything that can compensate for selling to the wrong prospect. Okay, it's garbage in, garbage out. In fact, I would say that one of the biggest crimes in all of business is just selling to the wrong prospects. Selling to the wrong prospect, right, is the biggest waste of time ever. Non-ideal prospects, they have more objections, they have the longest and slowest sales cycles, they have the lowest margins and commissions, they're the biggest headaches after the sale. In fact, in some cases, they actually become anti-references, meaning, right, you regret having sold them. I don't know if any of you have had that. And so as professionals, all we have is our time, right? It's our only resource. And what the Pareto principle dictates is that 20% of those folks that we're working with will actually consume up 80% of our time. So it is really, really important that we make sure that the 20% that we decide to spend time with are ideal candidates that have high probability of closing with us, okay? And that brings us to our second key point of the day, which is you're better off. This is tough medicine I'm sharing with you here. You're better off finding an ideal prospect to work with than to continue to waste time on non-ideal customers. Okay, so let that sink in for a second, because I know that's tough medicine, even though you might already be engaged with someone, right? Which is easy to do. Now you're having a conversation, right? If they're not an ideal prospect for you, you're really better off making them a lower priority. I'm not saying ignoring them, but you're better off making them a lower priority and going out and finding an ideal one. Okay, so it means shifting our effort from engaging, which I know is a lot more fun, to the prospecting and business development side of it, which a lot of folks consider less fun. Okay, and that brings us to our next key point, which is the highest leverage of your time is to focus on ideal, high probability prospects to begin with. If you let yourself work on garbage accounts, then you're going to get garbage results, right? That's how it is. And just getting this one principle right all by itself can make you massively successful. I'm going to give you an example of that here in just a second, okay? And the reason is because focusing on ideal, high probability prospects is literally the highest leverage strategy you can employ, period. That's what the data shows. So we start there. All other strategies are downstream from this one leverage point, okay? They're all dependent on this one. So that kind of makes us ask, all right, well, what does an ideal customer look like, James? I don't, how do I know that? And we don't have a lot of time to spend on this, but what you want to be looking at is you want to be looking at demographics, okay? Things that you can measure, like, how big are they? How much revenue do they have? How many employees do they have? Things like that. And then we should be looking at psychographics. And psychographics are things like, what's their attitude towards a certain thing? Or did a certain, what's their perspective, or did something happen that puts them in, it's just more emotional in its nature, the psychographics part of it. And you'll get this recording, so you'll be able to, we're not going to talk about every one of those, but you'll have the list, okay? So using that criteria, there's a really easy way to figure out who your ideal customers are, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to take your best customers, you're going to list them out, and then you're going to look at the defining attributes of those customers, okay? You're going to say, oh, look, they all seem to have revenues between this and this number, or they all seem to have this number of employees, right? Or they all seem to do this one thing, okay? You're going to look for the commonalities between them, and that's going to give us that for the demographics, but we're also going to do that with the psychographics. And then you've got, now I took my 10 best customers, I looked to create a little pattern, and I say, okay, we're looking for people that have this type of criteria. That's going to create another really great customer for us, right? That gives you a template for your ideal customers, okay? And I'm going to give you an example of this. You guys, a lot of you know that I came from the healthcare world, and in Hill-Rom, they make beds and furnitures in the healthcare space. And these guys, it's a big company, okay? But just by changing the accounts that their sales team focused on, they didn't do anything else. They didn't change their CRM. They didn't do additional advertising. They didn't do anything. All they did is they told their team to focus on this set of people, right? These target accounts. But just by doing that alone, they added $70 million in revenue to their company. It increased their product margin by 6.7%. It increased their operating margin by 51%. And believe it or not, it actually lowered their costs by a percentage, right? Because ideal customers, they're less expensive to service, right? And it actually improved their customer satisfaction. So literally, they did not do anything. There's a big famous Harvard study, business case study on this. You can go look it up if you want to, but they didn't do anything else but change who their sales team's targeted and focused on. Okay, targeting the right customer makes a huge, huge difference. They're more profitable, they're easier to sell, and they're happier. And that's what I want for everybody on this call. Okay, all right, second key area. So we just did market. Now we're going to do message. Okay, the focus of this part is the messaging that we're using to reach that market. Okay, and what's important for everybody in this on this call is that whether you're in sales or marketing or client service, it doesn't matter whether you're talking inbound or outbound. Okay, the goal is exactly the same. Goal is exactly the same, and that's to have a conversation with a qualified person. Okay, that's the goal here. And the only difference between the two is kind of where we start and what channels we use. But ultimately, that's the goal, right? Regardless of whether we're inbound or outbound, we're dependent on the messaging that we use in order to engage that target audience that we just talked about. And that brings us to our next key point, which is we are dependent on messaging to engage our target audience. And that makes messaging vitally important when it comes to business development, right? So you need to spend a little time thinking about what are you saying and how are we saying it and what does it mean, right? And I'll just share with you that in my position, I've had the opportunity to work with some very large organizations regarding their sales strategy. And a lot of times we start by looking at things like closing because that's how they know me, right? But in the majority of cases, when we get to peeling back the onion, you know what I find is that their basic messaging and value proposition just isn't well defined. Okay. And I know I don't necessarily think that everybody in this group falls into that category, but I will tell you, to me, it's mind blowing. I mean, I've seen entire sales machines and product launches built up around weak and completely non-existent value props. So all I would say here is I would just ask you, do you personally know what your value proposition is? Okay. And do you have a clear value prop for every solution that you sell? So, what's the value prop of a person? Like if a visitor comes to us and visits us at one of our chapter meetings, what's the value prop for them joining the chapter? Okay. Now I think you know that. In fact, maybe we'll do a little exercise on that here in a second. But why did they show up? Guys, they're trying to generate additional business. And maybe they're struggling with the different channels that they're using right now, right? And maybe they don't like face-to-face selling. They want to do something that's more personal, right? So those are some of the value props that are related. Now I'm going to get a little more scientific about this here in just a second, okay? But our core value proposition is mission critical information that you have to have. You got to have it. It's a big deal, okay? And the reason for it is it's foundational to everything else, right? So now we figure out who we're going to talk to. Now what are you going to say, okay? And there's actually 6 key elements to high impact messaging, and we're not going to be able to go through all of those today, but of those 6, the most important is the value prop that we're talking about here. So I'm just going to briefly tell you what a very basic value prop looks like, and you can see how this matches to what you're thinking your value prop is. Okay, so a basic value proposition has 3 parts to it. It has a metric, it has a direction, and it has magnitude. Okay, so a metric, very easy. How do you measure, right, the component of the thing you improve? So if we're generating new business, we might measure that in terms of the count, how many new opportunities we get. But we also might measure it by the size of those opportunities, which would be $1. So the metric is what's the thing we're improving, right? And then it basically answers the question, how do you know whether you're doing well or not, right? So if you're trying to apply this to your own business, I would just ask yourself, all right, well, how does a person know whether they're doing well or not in the area that you're serving? What's the thing that tells them that? That's the metric. Okay. And then direction is easy. Is it going up or is it going down? And the last, we have magnitude, which is how much is it going up? How much is it going down? Okay. So with that, you've got enough to craft a very basic value proposition. It's basically direction plus metric plus magnitude. So a very simple example of that would be, we improve close ratios by an average of 22%. Okay. That's something that we do at BPI is my company. Okay. And that's the bare minimum, guys. There's lots of other cool things you can do with your value prop, like add target statements and impacts and that kind of stuff. But what you should have is a value proposition for every solution that you sell, and a sort of a generalized value proposition that kind of encompasses your whole package. And with those prepared, you're going to be able to answer this question: why should this person see me? Why should this person come to our chapter? Right? By answering that question, that's the valid business reason for them to meet with you. Okay. So that's why these value props are important. All right. So key point number 9 here is that customers follow a predictable process when they make decisions. And as that turns out, that helps us create the messages that we're going to use. Okay, so I was accused of giving you too much detail in this part, so I'm just gonna trust me, this will be worth it. What you're looking on the screen right now is the buyer's journey. Initially, what happens, they're over here and they're unaware, they don't even know that they might be in the market, or they might need what you have. And then in the next phase, they become aware that they might have an issue, and they're starting to ask themselves, gosh, do I really have a problem here? Do I really need to do something about this? Right? And if they decide that they do, then they go over here like, well, yeah, but is it really big enough that I got to do something with this? Or can I just ignore it? Right? Can I just let it go? Right? And if they decide, yeah, it really is big enough that they need to do something about it, then they start thinking about how could I solve it then? Okay. And that might include your type of solution, by the way, but it might not. Right? So think about from a BNI perspective, sure, getting referrals is a channel to get new business. It doesn't have to be your only one. And so you got to remember, at this stage, they're saying, well, how could I solve this problem? Maybe I could just spend millions of dollars on Facebook advertising. Maybe that would solve my problem, right? And so anything is fair game at this stage. Once they've decided that a particular solution is the way to go over here, then they start thinking, all right, which solution is the best one? Okay, so whatever let's say you're a tire store, let's just say you're a realtor or whatever. Well, then they say, all right, well, how do I know which one is the best one for me? That's when they start thinking about comparing you to other people in your same category. Okay. Once they think they figured out which one's the best, then what they do is they justify the decision. They say, oh, wow, man, I'm about to spend a lot of money on this. Am I really going to do this? Is this really worth doing? And that's important because a really common thing, sorry, I'm going off script here a little bit. A really common problem is that deals get stuck right here in this stage where they're justifying. And they'll go quiet on you. They'll go silent. And what has happened in most cases is we didn't spend enough time here thinking about how big their problem was. We need to help them understand how big the problem is. And if we don't do this, they will stop right here and they will do that work. But at this stage, usually they're talking to us. And so we can help them calculate how big the problem is, right? And then, but over here on the justified decision side, usually we've already given them a proposal or something and they think they have everything they need from you. And so they don't talk to you about it. So if you want to unstick deals over here in this section right here, what you want to do is you want to spend a little more time over here in this side where you're talking more about and monetizing the problem. Okay. And we can do more on that in the Q&A if you want, because there's a lot to unpack there. Okay. Once they get past this, they say, yeah, this really is worth doing. That's the moment they start saying, all right, what's the best deal I can get on this? Okay. And then of course, once they've decided that, then they say, hey, how can I begin? So that's the buyer's journey. Okay. Now inside this model, there's basically 3 stages: awareness, consideration, and decision. Those 3. I'm just trying to simplify this, right? And in business development, we're most likely to be having conversations with them at this first stage here. We're in the awareness stage because we're making the prospect aware that they have a problem, that there might be some potential for upside, and how big that problem or upside might be. Okay. But one of the biggest mistakes, and this is an important takeaway here for today, is one of the biggest mistakes I see in regards to this buyer's journey is I see people trying to have a conversation with a customer in one stage right here. Hey, my solution's the best. That's what this guy's right here is saying, right? But this customer is actually over here in this stage. Do I have a problem? Okay. And what I'm about to say to you is important. When you speak to a stage that is farther along the buyer's journey than where the customer is, you come off as being pushy, even if it's completely unintentional. It damages rapport, but most importantly, it's just not effective. Okay. So, and the only reason we're doing this is to be effective, right? Okay. So the golden rule is this: meet the customer where they are, not where you are, not where you want them to be, but where they are. And in business development, customers are almost always in that awareness stage that we were just looking at. Okay. And that has a direct bearing on the kind of messages that you're going to put out there. Right. So we don't, guys, if they're still trying to figure out if they even have a problem, you telling them that you have a hot sale going on some product is not going to solve the problem. It doesn't they're still trying to figure out if it's even worth spending any energy on. Not that it's a great deal. And so you can see how important it is to know where your prospect is in this little journey that we're doing here. Okay. Now, you can see this is the buyer journeys we've been working with. Okay. Initially, you can kind of simplify this down to just 3 questions. Okay. Why change? Why now? And why you? Okay, those three questions. Why change? Why should you do something? Okay, why should you do that today instead of next year? Why not put it off? And why you? Why are you the best choice of those three? Okay, that's not all there is, but these three questions will really take you a long way towards crafting a successful message. So I'm going to look at just these three questions really quick. Okay, so the first is why change? This might surprise you. Statistically, 50% of all sales, of all opportunities, are actually lost to no decision. Okay, literally for most people, no decision is the biggest competitor. It's not some other competitor. It's just that they don't do anything. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that a compelling business case for change was never sufficiently developed for the prospect to change what they're already doing. And that's a big deal. It's literally the #1 reason for messaging failure. Okay. And so it's especially important for us if we want to generate new business that we're speaking to that stage of the buyer's journey and we're explaining to them why it is that they should change. Okay. The next one is the why now, which speaks to the urgency. Okay. Believe me, guys, customers are overloaded with opportunities. They can spend their money on all kinds of stuff. We need to be able to articulate why solving our particular problem that we address should be at the top of that list. Okay. And then the third question is the why you. That's the differentiating question. Why should the customer pick you over the other solutions out there in your same category? And to be honest with you, most people actually do a pretty good job of getting this particular message of the three down. On the whole, they do a good job. Where they're almost always lacking is the messaging around the other alternatives that are outside of their solution. Okay, and that's a big mistake and a big contributor to that 50% no decision metric. Is like, when we're comparing apples and oranges, like getting business from BNI versus just advertising, that's kind of apples and oranges, right? So we need to be able to help, but you can if you want during the Q&A, I'll tell you there's an easy way you can compare any two apples and oranges together. Okay, all right. So again, when it comes to generating new business, because we're engaging net new prospects, we're going to be speaking primarily to the why change and the why now messages. And remember, our golden rule is to meet the customer where they are. And when we're doing biz dev, they're almost always unaware that they should be making a change or even why they should be making that change and now. Okay, so when you answer those questions in your messaging in a compelling way, you're going to raise your success dramatically. Okay, and that brings us to point number 9, which is when you do that right, it's going to have a massive impact on your success. If I had another hour, I'd show you some mind-blowing case studies on that, but we're just going to move on here. Okay, all right, so medium. Okay, so we know who our ideal client is, right? That's our market. And now we've crafted a high impact message. So now how are we going to get that to them? How do we get this great message to the prospect? Okay, well, when I first started in sales, I was clueless. I told you I got drafted into sales. It's not all that funny. It was miserable for me for a while. Okay, but I was clueless. I didn't know what I was doing. And so they gave me this, I had a zero pipeline, so I had nothing to work from. I had to start from scratch. Had a $2 million quota. I was very motivated to do the work, but I just had transitioned from this other position to field sales. So I had no frame of reference of how I should be spending my time. Okay. In fact, the only way I knew how to generate new business was cold calling. That's the only thing I knew. Okay. So let me ask you guys a question. You guys type the answer in the chat here. Okay. Is cold calling, the best channel? I see there's a word missing there. Is cold calling the best channel to meet customers? Give me a yes or no in the chat. Okay, thank you. You are all correct. There was one yes. God bless you. Whoever said that yes, you're a killer. Okay. Okay. So the answer is no, it's not. It's not the best channel. But let me ask you a different question. Okay. Answer this in the chat. Okay. Can you actually succeed doing cold calling? Yeah, of course we can, right? And that's exactly how I succeeded. It was the only option I knew of, right? And cold calling maybe should be part of our mix. But let me ask you this question. Are there other channels that might perform a little bit better than cold calling? Come on. Yeah, referrals. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely, guys. And that's what we were talking about earlier, is on the whole, what the data shows out there is that businesses, entrepreneurs, salespeople, they don't focus on the highest leverage points in prospecting and business development efforts. Okay. And we have considerably more channels that we can leverage today to generate new business than just the single cold calling one that I had when I was getting started. Okay. And so you don't have to guess as to which channels convert the best to opportunities. I have done this work for you. I'm in the middle of a book on this. And this is an amalgam of a lot of data, actually, all combined into one picture here. And what you see here is a summary of the channels most relevant here to us in this group. And its conversion rate to opportunities, that's not the close ratio, but the conversion rate to opportunity is represented as a range. So there's a high number and there's a low number. Okay. Now, let me just ask you guys, you're all looking at this, at these metrics. Is there anything about this metric, these metrics that jump out at you? I mean, is anything like you're like looking at this chart, like, gosh, I kind of know something. I noticed something about the channels here. Yeah, referrals, right? Referrals. Holy smokes. Referrals as a channel completely slaughters every other channel by a country mile. Okay. It's amazing, actually. And I have a lot of data on this. So let me ask you a question. Okay. You guys type this in the chat. Why do you think that is? Why is it that referrals convert to opportunities so much better than everything else? Boom, look at it. All right, good. Marissa is the first one to nail it, right? It's trust, right? If I had to throw it, put it in one word, it's just trust. And when we get referrals, what we're doing is we're borrowing and we're leveraging a trusted relationship that two people already have in each other, okay? And I am telling you, it is the most effective lead generation strategy there is, bar none, bar none. And if the next closest thing is so far away, it's hard to even see who's second place. That's how much better it is. I could give you a lot of data. I'm just going to give you a tiny sampling here, okay, of statistics on referrals. In the conversion department, referrals convert to sales. Remember that last metric was converting to opportunities. This one is converting to sales. Referrals convert to sales 300 to 500% better than any other channel. Okay, period. It's amazing how much. I mean, nothing even comes close to it. And by the way, when you survey people, they know this, but they don't do it. That's the funny part. All right, in the value department, referred customers on average, they've got higher value. They spend 13% more than non-referred customers, and they have between 60 and 25% higher lifetime value than non-referred customers, meaning they buy more stuff over their lifetime. Okay, and then there's my favorite stat. You're going to love this. Okay, is that business people and entrepreneurs that actively seek referrals earn 400 to 500% more than those who don't. Now, let me say this. Okay, look at that, what it's saying there. That's not double, guys. 400 to 500% than those who don't, right? Nothing even come close. And like I said, I got a lot of data on this. I could go on forever about this. So what I want to do is I'm going to share with you my own personal experience with referrals. Okay. So I came from a company called NextGen Healthcare. And one time I got caught in the middle of a debate about the quality of the leads that we were getting from marketing. Okay. So I was managing a region. And so for my region, I had my assistant, Mary Potter. She contacted all of the leads that came in for a given quarter. It was almost 1,000. Okay. It was almost 1,000. And it took a long time to get this. She literally contacted every one of them. Well, let me back up. Marketing was saying things like, oh, well, our leads are coming in from, the website, or they're coming in from SEO. Okay. That's what they were saying. And my guys were saying that wasn't the case. So we had this little conflict going on, right? So anyway, Mary calls every one of these people, ultimately contacted them all. And it turned out she asked them one really important question that turned out to be very revealing. And it was this. She said, regardless of whether they went to the website or whether they typed our name in a search engine, she asked them this, because what made you go to that channel in the first place? So if they typed our name in Google, she'd say, well, what made you search in Google in the first place? If they went straight to the website, she'd go, well, what made you type our name into the your browser and go to the website in the first place? Okay. And this will blow your mind. This will blow your mind. What we found is in 74% of cases, it could be traced back to a person who had told them to do that. They'd say, hey, you guys should check out BNI. Right? Or you guys should check out NextGen. Boom. Next thing you know, they're typing our name in a search engine, or they're typing it in on the website, right? They're going straight to the domain, right? And so there's a word for this, by the way. In marketing world, it's called attribution. How do you know exactly, how do we attribute where the lead actually came from? It's a Gordian knot. It'll never be solved. Just take my word on that. So no need to get in any combative situation with your marketing people about that. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that referrals could possibly be even more prevalent in terms of where your business is coming that you might have previously thought. Because from my perspective, somewhere around 74% of all leads actually come from referrals, whether you know it or not. Okay. And by the way, I'm not the only one that says that. You'll recognize one of these sources, but both New York Times and BNI say that it's very high. I'm not crazy. I'm not the only person that is saying this. Okay. So here's the takeaway. Referrals are, and you guys all know this probably, but hands down, the highest leverage, most underutilized channel in sales today, period. Nothing comes close. If you did nothing else but leverage this one strategy and maximize it, you'd be successful. Okay. And I'm gonna just share with you really quick. right? I'm out in the street every day, right? I don't do what we're doing today. I do that maybe in 10% of my time. The rest of the time I manage a team. I'm out there in the street just like you guys are. And using referrals, okay, this is a picture of me and my team. When I first came on to NextGen, we had 3 turnkey deals before I came on board. And then I hired my team the following year, 1 year later, 51. And by the way, these are multi-million-dollar deals we're talking about. And we all used referrals to make this work. Okay, we went from 3 a year to nearly 1 a week, and it destroyed the company. They couldn't even believe how much business. Okay, and so this is the thing that I want to share with you. And I'm gonna give you one extra little thing. And I probably will be doing a workshop on this exact thing in Miami, where we get down and dirty and we spend a lot of time on it together. But this key point here is that we can use LinkedIn or society rosters, which is what I did with my team. I did both those things to shop for the referral or the introductions that we want before we even meet with clients. Okay, and that's a key point, because you can do the same thing at BNI. Okay, and there's 2 main reasons why this works super good, and it works good for BNI. I actually have an email in my box that I got yesterday from another group that we taught. He said, I tried this and then boom, it totally worked. He goes, this is amazing, it works. He gave me a little hashtag it works. That's what he put in his email to me. Okay, and so first, the reason this works is because our chapter members and our clients are already pre-wired to do introductions for us. They're always willing. They're always willing. Okay. Second, instead of giving them a description of what our ideal customer looks like, okay, and say, hey, the ideal customer for me looks like this, and then making them mentally think through it, all the people they know. Instead, you can identify the exact person that you want the introduction to, and you can say, hey, do you know this guy? Can I get an introduction to this guy? Okay, and if you do that, it's easier for them because they don't have to think about everybody in the world that they might know that matches the thing that you sell, right? Instead, you already went through LinkedIn and you identified it for them, and you gave me the exact name. Hey, do you happen to know Steve, right? I think we can help those guys. And they're going to say, oh yeah, Steve's part of our chapter, right? Or Steve and I have worked together for years, right? So it makes it easier for them because they don't have to think, okay? So let me show you exactly, if you're not familiar with LinkedIn, let me just show you how this works, okay? I'm going to apply this to basically having visitors come to a chapter, okay? But it'll work for your own business exactly the same way. Let's say that you or your visitor works with marketing professionals, okay? And that my chapter member is that I'm working with is my close friend here, Jenny Butts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pull up her profile, and I can see here that she's got 500 connections. You can see that right here. And then I'm just going to click on that, okay? And I'm doing this with the visitor, right? So imagine I say, hey, I tell my friend Jeff Milden, I say, hey Jeff, do you want to come to our chapter? Let's take a look at, Jenny's one of the members here. Let's go take a look at her connections. Okay, so Jenny doesn't have to be here for this. It's just me and my friend. Okay, and so now what we're doing is we are looking through her connections. And by the way, you can't see it here, but she got 12 pages of these, right? And so you could, if you wanted to, just start cruising through this, but that's a lot of time. So we're going to focus this just a little bit. Okay, so in LinkedIn, you're going to go up to this button here. It says all filters. Okay, and then we're going to narrow down this long list to something more manageable. And so you're going to see something like this, and then in this case, I'm going to say, all right, well, the industry that they're in is marketing and advertising, right? Because that's what we'll say. That's what Jeff does. Jeff does marketing and advertising. That's his person. His ideal customer looks like that. Okay, and so we're gonna, and maybe I should show you. We're going to choose show results, which is over here in this corner, and then boom. Now we're looking at a much shorter list. Okay, and so we narrowed that down to, in Jenny's case, 27 marketers that she's connected to. And like I said, that's an easy. So now I'm just going to cruise up and down this list with Jeff, and I'm going to say, hey, and we look through here and I see that she's got these 2 friends that are perfect entry points for my buddy Jeff, who's not a chapter member yet. He's going to be a visitor. Okay, so we've got Pia and Gina here, and these are the names that we're going to ask Jenny to do introductions for Jeff when he comes to the meeting. Are you tracking with me? Okay, so again, let me ask you, do you think Jeff is going to come to my chapter meeting now that I've already picked out the exact 2 people that Jenny's going to introduce him to? Yeah, of course he is, right? He knows that first meeting is going to be super valuable right from the get-go, because I just took a couple minutes with him. And think about it. This is just one of maybe 30 or 40 chapter members that we could do this with. Okay, so it's that easy. He's absolutely going to come because he's going to recognize there's going to be value right from the get-go. Okay. And a lot more could be said here, but that's basically how it works, right? We could do a whole set. We actually did have a training somewhere recorded that you guys can go look and see how to do this in more depth. Okay. But again, our visitor is going to be super excited to attend, right? Because they know they're going to get value right from the beginning. Life is easier for Jenny because she doesn't have to think through hundreds of connections in her network, right? About who's going to be the best person to introduce Jeff to. And who knows, if I tell her before the meeting, right, she might already have something lined up by the time they get to the meeting. Maybe she'll even invite them. Right? Wouldn't that be crazy? And maybe they're not a chapter member. And so both of them become chapter members, right? So you can start to see the potential here by just doing a little bit of work before that meeting. Okay. It ends up being a win-win for everybody. And all it requires is a little bit of time before we go to the meeting. Okay. Now, there's a lot more could be said, but you can see the value in this. So I'm going to give you some homework right now. I want you to write these 3 things down if you really want to maximize what I'm sharing with you here. First, you cannot do this little trick, right? I can't go see Jenny's connections unless I'm connected to Jenny on LinkedIn. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to connect with everybody in your chapter. Okay. I want you to connect with every single person in your chapter. Okay. Second, everybody wins when we do this. So take some time right after this session is over and then play around with LinkedIn a little bit and make sure you get an invite. I want you to systematically invite every person in your chapter to connect with you on LinkedIn. Okay. Then third, use it, right? Identify some ideal customers looking at some other chapter members that you have that you want an introduction to in your next meeting and for your own business, right? And then you're going to be able to speak to your own experience. So if maybe you're a coach and if you're a chapter coach and you're on this call, well, think about it. You're going to be able to do this, and then you're going to be able to share your own experience about how it worked for you. Okay. And some of you have access to multiple chapters, right? All right. I'm going to give you a second to write those down. Do all 3 of those things. Okay. This is your success that we're talking about here. All right. I'm going to hustle. I promise 5 more minutes and we're done. Right. Steve. All right. So we've covered the 3 of the 4 areas of high leverage. The last and the most important area is you, right? Because none of these strategies will work if you won't work, right? So it's you. So it's about our motivation. And as it turns out, there's actually 3 keys to long-lasting, sustained motivation. Okay. And in the time we have left, I'm going to show you the most important of those 3, the most important. Okay. This is Kaiba Gionfriddo. And Kaiba was born with a defective trachea, okay, that caused him to stop breathing almost every day after he reached about 6 weeks old. Literally, his parents were doing CPR on him every day. And ordinary doctors did not expect Kaiba to live. And this was happening all over the place. It happened in a theater, happened in a restaurant, happened in a moving car. I want you to just think about this for a second as a parent. What would it be like if at any moment your child might just stop breathing and die? Do you think they got any sleep at all? Right. And then think how horrible it was for Kaiba, right? Just helplessly struggling for air. I mean, the whole thing is just tragic. And they saw a ton of doctors, but because it was a birth defect, they just didn't have any answers. Right. And they thought, oh, well, one of these times they're not going to catch it. Right. And then Kaiba's not going to make it. Eventually, they got to this guy. This is Dr. Glenn Green at University of Michigan C.S. Motts Children's Hospital. And Dr. Green had developed this amazing 3D printed medical splint that maybe could be applied to Kaiba's trachea, maybe save his life. But the problem is brand new procedure, and materials, all this stuff was brand new. So he couldn't use it, right? Because they didn't have FDA approval. And you can see what this thing looks like right here. It's just this little thing. It's like the size of the top of a pencil. Okay. And like I said, it was new technology. So what Dr. Green did is he went to some really great lengths to try to help Kaiba out. And he used an emergency provision at the FDA to try to get permission and approval to try and use this tracheal splint to maybe save his life. And fortunately, the FDA approved it. So they did that procedure for the first time, not on an adult like they were planning, but on an infant instead. And fortunately, that procedure was a success, right? That biodegradable 3D printed medical splint saved Kaiba's life. And you can see Kaiba here after the surgery, right? And this is an emotional story. I mean, we marvel with gratitude at the efforts that were gone to save this young child's life. And we can sense with the goodness, right? We can connect with that. We're grateful to call ourselves part of humanity when we see this. I mean, we say, hey, if I could save a life that way, I would do it without hesitation, don't we? Don't we? Did you know there's a cell here? The CT, the MRI scans that made that printing possible cost money. The lasers, the 3D printers, the biodegradable materials to print with, all customers. They had never been on a reimbursement schedule. There was no way, there's no process to get that paid for through an insurance company. Okay. This is the guy that made that possible. His name is Scott Hollister. Now, we don't hear too much about the selling parts of these amazing stories, right? But I'm telling you, this is just one of many, many stories just like this one, right? There's thousands of stories just like this one. But I want to ask you a question. Is anybody unhappy about the fact that a sale was made here? Anybody unhappy about that? No, not at all, right? We are grateful that a sale was made here because that sale saved a child's life. It saved Kaiba's life, right? So let me ask you another question. Why is it we see this sale differently than we see other sales? Why is that? Well, what I would say to you, this is my opinion, is that we can more easily see the positive effects that the sale had on the person's life, right? We can make the connection. We can see, right, that the sale to help fund that medical splint, if it hadn't been done, a child's life would have been lost, right? We can connect with that. And so these dramatic examples help us to see what selling really is, guys, and that's service. Selling is an act of service. We're helping another person, okay? And every solution that we sell, right? Everybody on this call helps someone achieve a goal, fulfill a dream, or avert a crisis. That's it. One of those three things. Okay. Every solution, regardless of how large or how small it is, helps a real person move from where they are to where they want to be. And helping a customer move towards that goal is an act of service. And it shouldn't be difficult or stressful at all. It should be easy. Easy in the same way we'd say, if I could help, if I could save a life in that way, I would do it, right? Without hesitation. Then that's because selling really is serving. That's what it is. Okay. And so I want you to remember that. I will acknowledge there are times when it's hard, but it is 100% noble and 100% satisfying when we make it that way. We remember that selling is serving. We in the customer's life end up getting enriched in a virtuous cycle, and there should be no hesitation in that. In fact, it's motivating in its own right because we love to serve. We love to do it, right? Okay. Now I want to give 10 minutes. So I'm going to give you the really short version of this, guys. You may not know this, but you're in the top 2% of professionals just because you're on this call. Okay. I have data on all of this. The rest of the world, 98% of the world won't even come to this. They won't even come to this. Okay. So I'm talking to the best of the best. And as you apply the stuff that I've shared with you here, I promise you're going to become successful. I promise you that. Okay. And if you're even just making 50K a year, do you know you're already in the world's top 7% richest people in the world? Okay. It's 11 times more actually than the average person on earth. So, and if you're more than that, awesome. Okay. I just want to remind you, as you start to apply this stuff and you become more successful, I just want you to remember to pay it forward. Okay. Just remember, just like selling is serving, once you have resources, I believe that good people with resources is a good thing in this world. I really believe that. Okay. And so as you become more successful, just remember to pay it back. Okay, that is it. I'm sorry, Steve, we got maybe 10 minutes here for some Q&A if some people want to do that. And you're on mute, so I can't hear.
Yeah, there we go. So we've got about 7 minutes for some quick Q&A. So I will just quickly say, since you're on the slide, join us next week because we've got Carlos Banuelos on, and he is a master of running your entire business on your phone. That's all you need. Don't worry about your laptop. Get rid of that. So sign up for that one, but let's jump into Q&A right now since we've only got a couple of minutes. Marissa's asking, when is the best time in the process to ask clients for referrals? How many asks does it take on average?
Okay, so you're thinking about it. Let me tell you what the data says. A lot of people don't ask for referrals there's a number of reasons. And the number one reason that I hear is that they haven't earned it yet. Okay, so I know where you're going with this, but here's what the data says, by the way, is about 40%, 30-40% of people will actually give you a referral without you even soliciting it. And then there's another percentage that it's a very small percentage, about 10% that won't give you a referral no matter what you do. But the remaining section in there, which is between 50 and 60%, you have to ask. If you don't ask, okay. But and I know I don't want to teach anything that's contrary to BNI doctrine, we'll say, but I think what you'll find better luck with. Let me just tell you what happened with my team. When we use the word referral, the word referral kind of has a little bit of baggage to it. Okay, it means like you're endorsing me and you're valid. You know, you're saying that you're indemnifying them against anything that's bad again. Don't do that. There's baggage. So what we did is we just changed that word to introduction. That's all we did. And believe it or not, guys, we got all the benefit of the referral because this person, when they introduce you, there's an implied endorsement, even if they're not saying that. Okay. And so now they know, oh, well, Steve already knows James. He's introducing me. Steve thinks James is okay. That's all you need. You don't, so I would just recommend you drop the term referral altogether. And in terms of how many times do you have to ask, if you took all the books on referrals out there and you read them, which I've done, okay, I could boil it down, all of their advice in those books to one sentence, which is at some point, they want you to say, who else do you know can buy my stuff? Okay, I tried that. I failed at that. The thing that actually made a difference for me and my own team was looking for the exact name of the person I wanted the introduction to before we met, and then asking Steve, hey, do you happen to know Jenny Butts? I think we can help her. Then Steve doesn't have to think. He's like, it's either yes or no. And let me tell you what will happen when you do this. One of two things will happen. They will never reject you. Never. So one of two things will happen. Steve will say, oh, well, I know of her, but I'm not really all that familiar with her. So I wouldn't be able to do an introduction. But if I did, I'd be happy to, but I just don't know her that well. So they always act like they would do it, even if they can't, even if they don't. Okay. So that's good. That's the worst you're ever going to hear. But what happens most of the time is, oh yeah, Jenny and I worked together for a long time at BNI. I'd be happy to introduce you. That's what you hear. Right. And there's a little more nuance. Like there's some things, like if we could do a whole session on this, and there is a recording out there somewhere, but I will do a workshop on this, I think, in Miami. So hopefully that helps. I wouldn't ask a million times, and I wouldn't ask them to boil the ocean. Don't ask for 20 referrals. Pick the name of the exact person that you want and ask for that person. Okay. It's possible to do that either with society rosters or using LinkedIn, like I showed. So, okay. You got any more, or are we out of time?
We got one quick one and then one more question, then we'll wrap up. Since you were talking about books, someone asks, what are books that you would recommend to people who are in sales?
It depends on your kind of sale. So there's different.
Specifically, he is in solar energy.
Solar energy. So I'm trying to think of it. You know what a really good one would be is gap selling. He calls himself Keenan is his name, but his first name is James, like mine. Right. Gap selling is a good book for a more transactional style of sale, which is that. Right. So solar is good, but I'm telling you that referral thing that we just did will help you. You just get one. You already know this. I'm not telling you anything he doesn't know. You do a solar in one place, and then you ask that neighbor to refer all the other neighbors in the neighborhood about it. Right. So it's effective strategy.
Okay, a couple of people asked this question. So is it okay to have more than one ideal customer? While there is some overlap, I have 3 different customers that I cater to, and they are in different stages of their lives.
Absolutely. The answer is yes. And what you have to do is you have to treat them you're segmenting your market, right? And so you need to think about one in isolation. What's the value prop for that one? What's the value prop for this one? And so your messaging changes depending on, right? Like, let's say I am a financial planner. If they're looking at, retaining and making sure they have a cash flow in the end stages of their life, well, the value prop's very different for that person than someone who's like willing to take a ton of risk, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, you're going to segment, but you're going to do an ideal customer profile for each one of those segments. So it's totally okay to do. It just means more work for you, right? Instead of just doing one set of messaging, you're going to have to do 3 sets of messages.
Got it. Okay, so let's, this question came up about 37 times. Link Wackler says, happy birthday to me. Thank you, Link. All right, so people are asking if you would be willing to share the slides with them.
I think you already have those, Steve. So
I've got them. Yeah. So
yeah, okay, absolutely. Give it to everybody. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. And if you have the appetite for it, guys, I will, for a while, this will be the last presentation that I do for BNI. We've done stuff for about 2 years. I need to take a break so I can work on some other stuff and finish a book and everything. So my last thing will be in Miami, and then I'm sure I'll be back. And be doing more, but I would be happy to do a much more extended version of all this stuff if you guys have an appetite for that.
Yeah, that sounds great. We had a good crowd that was very excited about this presentation and took lots of notes, so that's great. Yeah, I will be sending out all of this, the material here, the slides and the link to watch the video again. So a lot of people were asking about that as well. And that's about it. Any final words before we sign off, James?
I just remember that last concept, selling is serving, right? So it should be joyful. It should be happy. It should, well, you're wanting to help another person. Sometimes they make it hard on us, right? But the truth is you're just helping another person. When you come at it from that perspective, it doesn't become draining. It becomes energizing.
Excellent. All right. Everyone give yourselves a CEU. We'll see you all next week. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Have a great week.